Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this artist talk. Held as a side event for this year's Camping Asia, which will officially take the stage in the coming November. Let me begin with a quick reminder. The following interview will be conducted in English, but you can switch to the Mandarin channel via the link below. Now, here we go. My name is Saraya Pai. I'm a freelance theater critic, writer, and translator based in Taiwan, and I'm honored to be your host tonight. It's a great privilege to be speaking with Anthony Hamilton, the world-renowned contemporary choreographer and dance artist from Australia. He is also the artistic director of the dance company Chunky Move. Tonight, we will be discussing their cross-cultural and multidisciplinary work, United. Maybe later we will asking about the title, because the title, there are some insertions between United. But anyway, United was born out of a 3-year creative dialogue between Chunky Move and the Indonesia-based musical duo Gabber Modus Operandi. In this work, you will see dancers wearing exoskeleton-like costumes, performing stylized and sculptural movements that create a hybrid aesthetics, which is both kinetic and ritualistic, primitive yet techno. And by seeing the clips, like I did, it really makes you wonder how the artists have come up with such a brilliant concept and striking visual imagination. So we are lucky to have the artist with us tonight. Hi, Anthony.
Hello, lovely to be with you.
Yeah. Do you want to say hello to the online audience here in Taiwan? Oh,
Yes,
and
good
also around the
evening.
world.
It's very lovely to be here, and good evening to all of you. Thank you for joining the talk. It's a pleasure to be able to share some concepts and ideas around this performance that we're so excited to bring to Taipei.
Where are you now?
I'm actually at home in Melbourne, and so I'm not. I left the studio this afternoon, and it's a little later here. So yeah.
Great, nice speaking to you. And but some of the Taiwanese audience might already be familiar with Chunky Move, since the company brought Mortal Engine and the Complexity of Belonging to Taipei in 2010 and 2015. I actually went to see Complexity of Belonging myself, and I was deeply impressed by how the choreography reflects on the diasporic experiences. And if my memory is reliable, I think you were also one of the performers in both productions. But after that, you were also here last year for Adam Kitchen as part of the Adam project. So can you tell us, how does it feel to be back in Taipei after more than a decade? And maybe what happened during the 10-year gap?
Yes. Firstly, we are extremely excited to be coming back to Taipei. We have very fond memories of being in the city, and yes, as you mentioned, the company has traveled before with Mortal Engine and Complexity of Belonging. I performed in Mortal Engine, and it's a very interesting transition that I have undertaken because it's quite a rare context in a way for a dancer with a company to have a strong history with the company to then later take the role of the artistic director. In the time in between, I did spend 15 or so years as an independent artist making my own work. So I returned to the company after, developing a whole artistic practice separate from the company. And yes, that's exactly right. We were actually at TPAC last year, at the end of last year for Adam Kitchen, where we were able to share a small work in progress showing of United, and it was wonderful to have a very small test audience to experience these beautiful exoskeleton costumes that were already in the development phase for the work. And from the experience that we had in that workshop period, I think we're feeling really very excited to come to meet audiences again, because the response was just wonderful when we were there in 2024.
Thank you. But can you talk about the title? Can you talk about the title, United? There are some insertions, some marks between every
Yes.
letter.
Yes. So between each letter, we have this mark which indicates the symbol in mathematics for greater than. So, I'm a big fan of playing with symbols and recontextualizing symbols so that they take on new meanings, even if they are a little bit disconnected from the original meaning. But for the work United, my concept for the work was about something being greater than its original form. There are a number of concepts in the work that explore the idea of this possibility. One is that I think the intercultural connection and the diverse experiences interculturally that we bring into this artistic project and through the title United is something that also makes us greater. We learn from each other, we listen to each other's stories, we hear each other's perspectives, and they inform the concepts and the imagination for the work. And then the other thing that's interesting for me about the idea of imagining something that's more complete and greater than the thing on its own is the idea of the human experience being deeply interconnected with our environment, and in particular with the things that we create, the tools, the technological materials that we develop, that become such a deep part of our lives. I'm hopeful, and I find a great sense of aspiration in the idea that maybe we can be greater if we find a harmony and a connection with those things that we make.
Thank you. United is the collaboration between Chunky Move from Australia and also Gabber Modus Operandi from Indonesia. We don't usually think of these two countries as culturally or historically connected, but if you look at the map, they are actually quite close to each other, geographically. So can you share with us how the collaboration really began and how you fuse the iconic elements from both cultures into this piece?
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. Part of my process as an artist and as an artistic director is to keep my attention very closely on the cultural practices of peers and other artists in other parts of the world. And I'm always looking for artists who might have a language, an investigation, a research, a practice that I can connect with, and I feel a sense of connection with, and an immediate sense of interest in, and an excitement with. It's an interesting story how I connected with Gabber Modus Operandi, because I think we think about the technological environment as an artificial environment, but it's really, in the contemporary world, a very natural environment. So I'd like to think about the natural environment and then the natural environment of the internet. And because it's actually through Instagram that we met, a new, way of communicating and finding cultural connection with people, but across borders. I discovered Gabber Modus Operandi's work a number of years ago when they presented a performance at Dark Mofo in Tasmania, a festival in a very southern state, in the island state of Tasmania in Australia. And we saw each other's work. We found each other's work very interesting and very captivating. And then we became friends online, and a lot of emojis, a lot of hearts and things, to show love for each other's creations. Then, we developed the possibility to come together to collaborate on this work. I think artistically, there's some real strong connection between Gabber Modus and myself. But we're all interested in history, and we're very interested in how history is carried through into the contemporary, and we're interested in what are the kind of cultural connections between, the deep past with the present and potentially into the future. I think as artists, they're extremely imaginative in their development of taking traditional music into contemporary cultural contexts of the club. they had some fascinating stories to share with me about the history of Rotterdam Gabber techno, which of course Indonesia has had a troubled history of Dutch colonial presence in Indonesia, and it's very interesting that the Dutch techno, Rotterdam techno, was actually it was explained to me that it was actually developed by the Indonesian diaspora, even though we think of it as a European form. So anyway, a very long answer, but we found a really strong synergy very quickly to work together.
You mentioned that you knew each other through IG, but how did you get to maybe meet face to face and to talk about collaboration and even for this project together?
Yeah. So after we did meet online, we ended up traveling to Bali, and we spent a week of research time in late 2023 to explore different concepts and different ideas, and we actually also developed already this exoskeleton suit, which we took with us to Bali to share with the artists that we wanted to work with. And at that time, we also met Manda, who is the lead head designer of the streetwear label Future Loundry, based in Bali. And they ended up creating the costumes for the work as well. So Future Loundry and Gabber Modus Operandi have a strong connection also. And the exoskeleton costume really excited them when they saw it, because we felt again this strong connection between the urban experience, the experience of the human body in the technological environment and in the urbanized environment, and the sense that there is a deep connection between the body and this environment.
Since you talk about the costume, it's really impressive. I mean, moving with this kind of actual skeleton structure or maybe installations. But I'm also curious how the costume challenges the physical movement of the dancers and how it might allow different kind of freedom to liberate their bodies.
Yes, it's a great question, and I think there's a great tension there as well, because of course there are certain new possibilities and new architectures that the body can perform with this new structure. But of course, it also is a very, very large limitation on the body. And it was probably one of the more challenging aspects of the work was to develop a new choreographic language that actually supported the way that these objects moved. It's a little bit like learning to ride a bike backwards or something like this, because a dancer has a deep embodied knowledge, a deep training which allows them to perform extraordinary things. And then, of course, when you place this material on the body, all of that possibility is a little bit gone, and you have to reinvent. I think part of my interest and the history of Chunky Move also has actually always been about these problems and the difficulties that come with putting these contexts together and trying to find ways to problem solve and find new languages and a deeper appreciation actually of the complexities of our relationship to the world. So the costumes do much more than just alter the choreography. They make us much more aware of our relationship to materials, our relationship to the world around us, and they make us take greater care, I think, in the way that we move through the world. So quite deeper things occurring for the performers when they're working with these materials.
So when you decide the exoskeleton costume, did you have any particular references in mind? Maybe like some insects from the natural environment, or sci-fi movies, or maybe animations?
Yeah, that's a good question also. I think My influences, I would say, are from very varied places. I'm a lover of culture. I'm a lover of all sorts of cultural influences. Um, I'm particularly, a lover of science fiction cinema and visual art and sculpture. And all of these elements together, I tried as much as I can to like bring those elements into the dance world, because for me, growing up as a dancer, but then becoming an artist myself, I always found that it's a shame not to blend ideas together and to not use the theatrical context to bring new ideas into it to explore. So, even if I wanted to be a visual artist or I wanted to be a filmmaker, I was actually in the dance world. So I had to find ways to bring those interests in, and for many years it was kind of quite challenging to express to other people the reason for putting these things in the work. But it's largely because I can't help myself. I'm always so fascinated to bring other things into the dance vocabulary, and for it to help teach me new things and teach me new ways of doing things. You mentioned animation and cinema, and also you mentioned whether there are things from the natural world that also influence me or inspire me. And it is one of the bigger areas of interest for me, is our sort of perception of the natural world, the artificial world, and this kind of separation that we tend to see. I think what is so unique about the human animal, and we are an animal of sorts, is this idea that we are self-aware and we see our world as kind of separate from us. It seems to me that most other life forms, most other animals, are more at peace and interconnected with their world without it becoming a problem for them, And so we create this problem all the time, and I think it's to do with our self-awareness and our consciousness, what we understand about consciousness. Um, and I think that's actually one of the most core interests in this work. The idea that material things, tools, and objects that we build and make are kind of representations of our consciousness. And in that sense, this is why I talk about a sense of machine mysticism and spirituality. It's the idea that all of the things that we make as human beings are somehow, they carry some sense of a spiritual sense of us.
Yes, just like what you mentioned. When I watched the trailer, it felt like we can relate to what kind of images we have in mind, maybe from the animations or sci-fi movies or something from the natural world. But we can have our own interpretations. But anyway, you mentioned a very specific creature, dragon, in your work. So why is it?
Yeah, I mean, we use the term dragon because it's an extremely common mythological creature that is seen in very different contexts around the world and in many different cultural contexts. Um, when I create images in the studio or on stage, usually they don't mean anything actually in the beginning, and they have no name and they have no purpose. But what happens is, as I make the scenes, they speak to me. They speak to me, and I go, it looks a little bit like a large beast. Maybe it's a scorpion. Maybe it's an insect. Maybe it's a dragon. And we gravitated to the word dragon just almost as a code name for this image in the work. But I do think it is important that there's a certain kind of interest in global mythology and the ideas of gods and heroes and these kind of archetypes, these things that all human cultures really connect to, these common stories. There is always this relationship of human beings to the supernatural our belief in a spiritual realm, and also our connection to our fears, our fears and also our courage in the face of those fears. So we utilize the image of this dragon also as a sort of as a kind of a counterpoint to the single human being that is having to face its fears or face something difficult in its situation. So it represents something quite special in the performance. Yeah.
So apart from the collaboration with Gabber Modus Operandi and the Bali fashion label Future Loundry for costume design, you also work with the animatronic pioneer Creature Technology Core for exoskeleton design and fabrications, among many others. So can you talk about the challenges working across discipline and the collaborative experience with your partners throughout the creative process?
Yes. So yeah, you mentioned Creature Technology Co. We have been very build a relationship with this extraordinary company. This is the second project that we worked on with Creature Technology Co. The first work that we made with them was in 2019, and it was also about a 3-year process of development through to production. And in many ways, it had a similar sense of cinematic potential, like the production design really kind of drew from a cinematic lineage in a way in terms of the finishing of material elements. And most of their work actually is in much larger scale contexts, very big theme park attractions, animatronic dinosaurs, stage shows like King Kong. So they're usually working with these extraordinarily large animatronic puppetry. For the work that they do with Chunky Move and with me, it is much smaller. And in fact, they're more, working with much less sophisticated materials. Most of the elements within the project that we're making are more like traditional puppetry, actually. They're actually not so much robotic elements, no animatronic elements. They're actually all organic, articulated, moving elements that are simply moved by the performers. To talk about the challenge of collaboration and what it means to collaborate with other artists, the reality is, I think, for me, it's very normal for a stage production and a theatre production or a dance production to involve collaborators all the time. We always work with a lighting designer. We always work with some sense of staging design. We're always working with composers. And all of the dancers indeed share a sense of collaborative work. The challenge, I guess, is every time the holding of those relationships and the kind of ensuring that everybody is fulfilled and feels like the contribution that they've made is meaningful is probably the hardest thing, and as an artistic director, it can be quite difficult because I usually have a very strong vision for what will occur, but I also want to make sure that everybody's voice is present in the work. So this is the delicate balance of collaboration, and it never gets easy. Every project, it's always a lot of work to make sure that this is treated with great care.
Thank you. But since you were actually scattered around the world, I mean, with the collaborators, Future Loundry or Gabber Modus Operandi, did they join the rehearsal process at a very early stage, or how did you work? Online or during the in the rehearsal studio? Sorry, the feed slowed down a little bit there, but I'm not sure if I got exactly the question, but I think you were asking whether there was more studio time or whether there was an online exchange as well. Yes, and about at
The
what stage?
contact time.
Also,
Please.
at what stage did I join the rehearsal? Did I work with you at a very early stage, and also with the dancers?
Yeah. So for creature technology, we worked with them quite early. We worked with them much earlier than the studio time with the dancers. So we tend to develop a kind of visual language and a material world with material elements that the dancers can work with before the dancers arrive. And it's quite important that we do that because we don't always want to be figuring those things out in a very short amount of time when we're working with the dancers. So we spend quite a lot of time researching these articulated moving components to make sure we have something at least a little bit ready for the dancers to develop these new choreographic languages and these new movement languages. With Gabber Modus Operandi, it came a little bit later because also we wanted to use the exoskeletons to also encourage them to get involved in the project. We wanted to show them something really special to invite them to be a part of. And I think with the music context, it is somewhat easier in this contemporary time to work remotely. But Gabber Modus, they did join us in the very first studio creation period for just about a week. But a lot of the creation, a lot of the composition was developed actually remotely, and we worked with it without them in the room. And then with Future Loundry, they came a little bit later again. So they were in the final stage creative development. They brought a whole lot of so interesting, beautiful garments that they had made from upcycled materials. So using existing clothing that is rebuilt and reimagined into these extraordinary sculptural creations. And they were a little bit closer to the premiere of the performance. So yeah, definitely working with each collaborative element at slightly different stages. And again, like with every project, it's quite different.
Thank you. United actually premiered in February at Asia TOPA in Melbourne and has since been touring internationally. As we know, the creation of live art is always an organic and ongoing process. So I'm curious, has the work evolved or changed in any possible way since its premiere? And what can the audiences here in Taipei look forward to this November?
Yes, the work certainly does evolve. And that is the beauty of having a show that actually has an ongoing life. The biggest change is that the artists who perform the work deepen their connection to the story and deepen their connection to the performative language of the work. And so the wonderful thing that audiences in Taipei will experience is this much richer, performative, grand, just a deeper connection that the performers have to the work. It is interesting taking the work to different spaces and contexts. When we went to Venice, it was very, very different experience to the premiere. And I think partly because in Melbourne, we've really built an audience here who have become, much a closer, like a family almost. The audience who come to our shows, they come to our shows regularly and they understand the work and they have a close association to it. So sometimes when we take our work into new context, it can be a little bit of a surprise for people because it's so unfamiliar to people. The work that the company makes, the work that I make, is significantly experimental, and so it's sometimes people meet it with quite dazzled and surprised by what they're seeing. I'm so interested in the imagination and finding deeply exploring very imaginative experiences on stage. So yeah, I'm sure that the audiences will find it compelling. I really hope so. And yeah, as I said, I can't wait to bring it to Taipei.
Yeah, me too. And I'm also wondering, is this always performed in a black box? Although this time it's a blue box here at TPAC. But did you try different venues to explore different possibilities with the spaces?
Yeah, I mean, what we try to do as much as possible is make sure that the works that we create are very modular, and that we work quite responsively to spaces, and we take our time to ensure that the space feels really well connected to the work. So, the design elements in this work, they do kind of float in the middle of the space, and the audience sees the work on two sides. So you come in and watch it from, one side or the other. And so I think once you have the audience opposite you, you have the feeling more like a stadium. It's more like like being at a sports event, where you can see the audience, you can feel their reactions, and you feel a little bit closer to the performance. So the room itself, it doesn't play into it too much, actually. It's more about how people meet each other in the space, and that's the special thing, I think, in the audience experience for this particular performance.
I see. When I was reading through the materials and preparing for this interview, one term really caught my attention: machine mysticism. What does it mean exactly?
Yeah, machine mysticism is something that Gabber Modus Operandi and I became very fascinated with the idea of. A couple of words that we kind of just threw around as an idea. We share this idea that all material things that human beings make have a kind of essence of a spiritual sense in them. And it's something I spoke about just briefly earlier, was that most most tools that we make, we think of them as just being for utility, just for a function. We don't usually think of them as being a spiritual object or a sacred object. But I'm interested in the idea that they all are these sacred art objects. And that is because it is our awareness and our sense of self-awareness and our consciousness that moves into these material things, and they're designed with purpose. And so in a way, everything that we make represents our self-awareness. And yeah, it's just an idea that, tools as well, they're not always just for function. I mean, even in the like ancient history, we can think about something like a sword and a shield. Let's say in like European culture, a sword and a shield, they might have a purpose, but they also usually represent something, and they are very symbolic. They might represent a clan or an aristocracy or a royalty or a particular family or these sorts of things. So an object is not just an object. It actually has these these much deeper representations and symbolic power. But the mysticism is the idea that that those material things are in some senses alive. That we're not the only things that are living, but everything has a sense of a life force in it.
Yeah. So do you think people experience machine mysticism differently before and right now in a digital age, or even in the post-digital age?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think that we very easily as human beings forget a sense of the spiritual in material things. Um, so I think in many ways the performances that I try and create try to reconnect audiences back to an idea that the world around us and the material things that we engage with are fundamentally really, really important. And I try to remind audiences also that, human beings are not aliens on their own planet. We are not disconnected from our world. I create images that I hope, help people feel that we are more deeply connected to the material world around us. So to talk about it in contemporary terms, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure whether there's a disconnect from the sense of the spiritual because of the contemporary world or our relationship to technology. I mean, a good example actually for me is AI. You know, I think many people want to believe that AI has this potential, this possibility to emerge with consciousness at some point, you know. And I think this is a fascinating idea. I personally don't think this is ever going to happen, but it demonstrates, it shows that most people would love that, you know, in a way. It's almost like we want to believe that there is this spiritual force inside the machine, like inside technology. There's another phenomenon that I found really fascinating to think about, which is the phenomenon of the weeping statue. You know, the weeping statue of well, there's many cultural contexts in which people have you know, claimed to see that a statue is weeping, and you know, it's another example of this idea that that an object that we know is doesn't have life in it is actually we project the idea of life and spirit inside this object. I think AI and a weeping statue are actually very similar.
Yeah, since you mentioned it, I think people used to have a stronger connection with the material world. So it used to bring the power. It used to bring a powerful contrast between the material and the spiritual. But right now, we are surrounded by the like virtual reality, and we are gradually losing contact with the material world. So right now, we might have a different experience about spiritual or immaterial. That's what I feel.
Yeah. No, I hear that. I hear that. Maybe it's interesting to talk also about, um, I think in you know, deep history, there might have been an experience of a sense of spirituality or life force in like the wind, you know, or in kind of like phenomena like rain or thunder and storms, or in forests and in, you know, the movement of trees, a sense that there was a spiritual force occurring there. I sometimes feel like we do create kind of these mythologies and stories about new technology, and that they have, yeah, like replaced the natural world in some sense, and our sense that there's this, you know, this possibility of a kind of like spiritual realm within technology.
Yes, so to follow up, does it require a different kind of rehearsal approach when you try to address to collective embodiment and ceremonial communion in a non-Christian sense in a post-digital age?
Can you repeat it one more time, please?
Okay, to follow up, does it require a different kind of rehearsal approach where you try to address to collective embodiment and ceremonial communion in a non-Christian sense in a digital age, post-digital age?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Does it make sense to you?
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in it. I think for me, what I try and achieve when I work in a studio space and in a collaborative context is I try to invite everybody's experience and everybody's cultural experience into the room, and to in a way drop the cultural experience that we all have, and build a new one that is connected to the elements that are in the space that we are working with. And so I think none of us can completely drop our own history and our own story. Of course, we all carry it with us, but it is part of, I think, a process of working with a group of people in a work like this, that you are attempting to genuinely create a new kind of ceremony, you know, that is yours. Actually, it's yours with these people. And even if that small community is only like 10 or 12 people, you still share an experience. You share the development and the pathway, and the stories that go with that pathway through the creation of it. So um, it's hard. I think it's quite difficult to do that, and it requires a lot of trust, and it also requires people to enter into it willingly and want to share an experience like that and contribute to it. But yeah, it certainly is a complicated exercise.
So by doing that, is there any particular physical or mental qualities of your dancers when you chose your dancers?
To be honest, not in particular, because I actually think that everybody has the capacity to explore uh, these sorts of ideas, and everybody has a kind of value to bring to these ideas, and a value to bring to a space where we're all listening and we're all sharing ideas and stories. Most of my other works as well involve a lot of other different people. So I'm very familiar with this idea of coordinating people together and creating a space for them to feel connected to the concepts and feeling like they're making contributions to it. The dancers, in this particular work, actually, I mean, there's a couple of layers there. Yeah, there's certainly like there's a movement practice that some of the dancers are bringing that come from different cultural contexts. So they're working with a combination of street dancers and also contemporary dancers who have other lineages of dance training, and sharing in the space together. And that is particular, but I think the main particular thing that all of the dancers are bringing is a certain capacity for quite intense relationship to the environment, and like a real courageousness to connect with this like physical material that is so challenging for them to do their best work. But I would say that mental and physical resilience doesn't come in at the beginning necessarily. It is something that is built over the course of the creation, as we all uncover and discover just how difficult it is. And sometimes I get into situations where I feel like I'm sinking in the challenge, and I have to swim out and to find a way out to make it work.
So you must be a very good swimmer. But
I
despite
haven't drowned yet.
great, good to know. Despite the avant-garde, paganistic yet futurist, individual or collective, half human, half machine bodily expression, much of your dance vocabulary seems to draw from daily life, culture, and personal interest. Could you share some of the key sources of inspiration in United?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely a product of my environment, and I'm very happy to allow the influences of my life to all come into the room. It's like I was saying earlier. I think I ended up in the dance world, but I have passions elsewhere. I have passions everywhere in different art forms and in different popular culture elements, and I also connect my artistic practice now to childhood, because really I think the best kind of work is if you can still connect to play and a sense of playful imagination where you don't feel afraid to try things. Children are so good at committing to their ideas and just exploring them without self-consciousness. Yeah, I grew up studying classical ballet, but I was also practicing breakdancing in the street context in the 1980s and 1990s. It was a really not a formal space at all. It was very much a parallel world. So the classical ballet world and the studio practice was one world, and the street dance world was disconnected. They never ever crossed over. So I felt like my life as a student as well was living different lives actually simultaneously, which was interesting. But then, yeah, we've sort of discussed that cinema has played a large part for me, and music videos, like, of course, they were huge in the 1980s, and they informed a lot of my interests. So music videos of Michael Jackson, and Janet Jackson, and the choreography of Paula Abdul, a lot of commercial dance, and you know, yeah, music video dance is very influential. Not the the histories of Western contemporary dance or classical ballet. Not really. I didn't really inform my work as much. I've always been attracted to counterculture and hip hop. And also, in particular, the avant-garde of hip hop. Like, there's what you could call the mainstream of hip hop as well, but then there's the avant-garde artists who came from um, the downtown scene in New York in the early 1980s, who were associates of people like Jean-Michel Basquiat and Andy Warhol. So people like, there's an artist called Ramel Z, who was probably the most obscure avant-garde hip hop artist of that time, and who developed these incredible costumes that had their own sense of the mythological as well. So yeah, many different references, science fiction cinema, of course, um, and counterculture like street art and those sorts of things.
Yeah. So here comes the last question before we get some from the audience, and it is loosely related to the previous one. With such a strong dance background, do you see yourself performing in your own works again in the future?
I hope so, actually. It's certainly something that I've been exploring the idea of doing. I'm 47, and so for a dancer, it's old, but it's not, it's not old. But interestingly, sometimes I feel like, age is not an issue with dancing. I feel like I'm a more embodied dancer now than I was when I was 25. Something about relaxing into the art form, and not being, you know, battling the art form in a way, an internal fight. Um, but the other thing about dancing, I think, is I'm very, very invested in platforming next generation artists. I want to make time for them. There are some extraordinary dancers, and they all deserve to have a space and a platform. So the one thing that really holds me back from performing is not wanting to take up their space. So yeah, but I do enjoy performing, and it probably won't be the last of me being on stage.
Thank you. And we've got two questions from the audience. The first one is about the field work you've done for United. Did you really go to Indonesia to experience some of their local rituals? And if so, what were they?
Yeah, no, we did. We did. So the one week that we actually visited Bali to meet with Gabber Modus Operandi, we went to the Ajatelan trance ritual, and it was so incredible to witness the same, in a way, sense of the process of moving through different stages of movement and sound, and different stages of connection with others in a space, to propel a person into a trance state, and feeling a sense that there's a deep connection for that with the kind of dancing that we're doing in the studio also, that is about endurance and about exhaustion and about taking your body and your mind into a space beyond the capacity where you thought it could go. I wouldn't say that we've accessed a trance state, but there are parallels definitely with that. And like, I mean, I think just culturally in general, just life on the street in Bali, the bustling vibrancy and the energy of the street, and the relationship of urbanization to that place, to the natural world, and the way that urbanization meets the jungle, and it's like intertwined in such a way. was extremely informative to the way that we were thinking about United being this deep connection of the organic and the biological with machine, you know. So yeah, it was definitely very informative.
The last question is the practical one. If the audience want to buy tickets, in your opinion, what is the best viewing positions to see United?
Yeah, that's a good question. They're all good. They're all good. But I mean, the lovely thing about being in a theater, I suppose, is you have opportunity to choose. This show, I think it's really nice to be up close, if I'm honest, because much like, you know, a community experience or ritual, you know, being close to the front and being close to the people who are enacting that performance or the ritual, it's like, I think it's nice to feel like you're in there with them and you're part of it. So the front is very good.
Thank you. So I think we'll have to end the interview here. Thank you, Anthony, for your valuable time and insightful sharing. I would also like to thank our online audience for joining us tonight. Actually, Anthony is one of the mentors at this year's Camping Asia. He will be here in Taipei, working with our students from both Asia and Europe during the intensive 2-week workshop. Some of the Camping Asia events will be open to the public or TPAC members. Please check the website if you want to know more about it. But most importantly, save the dates, November the 20th and 21st, to experience the machine mysticism live in United, presented by Chunky Move. Thank you. Bye-bye
Thank
and have
you.
a good night.
Bye.